Hi guys, welcome back to the backlog. I'm Evan and today I want to talk about I want to talk a little differently about Jedi Fallen Order than I have about any other games on my channel to date. I want to talk naively about it. I want to talk about it with a kind of earnest admiration that I have for it. It's in vogue at the moment to write video essays that weave stories about game development and the games industry at large into their narrative, or that make interesting connections to some aspect of society or culture. And don't get me wrong, I love that stuff, I do that stuff. But Fallen Order has been a comfort game to me for years now, and I think there was a part of me that worried about losing that comfort factor, as if by looking too critically at the game, my affection for it might dissipate like shadows under the gaze of a torch. So instead of doing the deep critical dive that I maybe should have, I made this, which is an attempt to explore my own affection for the game. It's a video about why I think it's so special, and what about it draws me back to the galaxy far, far away over and over again. There's a lot to love about Jedi Fallen Order. I've said for a long time that I think it's the most Star Wars-y feeling piece of media that's come out since the prequels. It really just nails the texture and the feeling of George Lucas's setting in a way that something like Solo, the Clone Wars, or even some of the sequel trilogy struggles to. I mean, you just drink this shit in. Just chef's kiss. Mwah. I remember stepping out of the ship and being greeted with this for the first time. I smiled ear to ear. Straight away I knew that this game had the Star Wars sauce. Once the combat gets going, it's also tons of fun to play. You get a handful of basic combat tools and can experiment at will. Push, pull and slow are super solid building blocks for a tactile and expressive combat system, and I never get tired of playing it. What's so striking about Fallen Order though, and what keeps me coming back to it again and again, comes back to the game's themes, or rather I think to its lack of themes. You see, Star Wars at large has always been about a lot of things. It's always been political, touching on rebellion and slavery, subjugation and tyranny. The darker and more overtly political themes of Star Wars though usually play a second fiddle to the more light-hearted swashbuckling adventures and the personal drama of its protagonists. Can Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon defeat the villainous Darth Maul? Will the Mandalorian track down Baby Yoda? Oh my god, are Luke and his sister going to fall? Star Wars is traditionally, distinctly and deliberately adventure first. Fallen Order breaks that mould though, in a way that only a video game could, by binding the light-hearted adventure, the personal drama of its characters and its themes so tightly to its moment-to-moment gameplay that they're no longer distinguishable. So like I said, Fallen Order doesn't really have themes, it has theme. It has one theme, it has one big fat theme, and that theme is trauma. Every part of the narrative, every character, and even the entire progression system are all woven around this central load-bearing pillar. Cal Kestis and every member of his posse all come complete with their own baggage. Trauma pushes the narrative forward, and watching the characters resolve their individual traumas one by one is as satisfying as watching dominoes falling into place. The writing team at Respawn took great pains to give each character room to breathe, and they all get these gorgeous, squeaky clean arcs as a result. Even Merrin, who by far gets the least screen time, gets the star treatment in the writing department. Merrin is introduced as the sole survivor of the Night Sisters, and the main antagonist of the sinister planet Dathomir. Worth noting is the way that Merrin says Dathomir.
Dathomir will be your grave!
Merrin, I am free on Thursday night. Please respond to this and then hang out with me on Thursday night when I am free. Dathomir is a ruined and desolate place, home only to a clan of fierce warriors led by Merrin. She terrorizes Cal on his early visits to the planet, empowering her brethren and sicking the reanimated corpses of her dead sisters on him. Merrin is the very last of her kind, and she armours herself in tradition, wearing her duties like a suit of plate. As I mentioned, her main method for attacking Cal is summoning her dead sisters, using the ghosts of her past, symbols of her loss to lash out. The symbolism isn't subtle, but it is effective. After Cal earns her trust, she opens up and she realises that the best way to honour her sisters is not to insulate herself here, to live in pain amongst their graves at the edge of the galaxy until the end of her days, but instead to carry their legacy out into the galaxy at large. Although there are some light suggestions of a romantic connection between the two, I think it's really great that Merrin doesn't leave for Cal, she leaves for her and for her sisters. And this is what I mean when I say the symbolism, the narrative and the gameplay and the themes all work in perfect sync all the time. It's incredibly satisfying. Seer and Grease, on the other hand, the duo who save Cal in the game's introduction, get the same excellent setups and payoffs, and I promise you I'll tell you all about that. But I now have a physical need to sashay into talking about the intro for a second because oh my god. Jedi Fallen Order has one of the strongest intros to a AAA video game in recent memory, and I never hear anyone bring it up for some reason, which is a crime. It starts out with this very typical Star Wars shot of a big starship passing overhead, but the camera then pulls back to reveal that it's actually a wreck being hauled to a scrapyard. Ruined ships are piled high as far as the eye can see, ships from the Clone Wars, Republic and Separatists alike. As a bit of imagery to establish the game's tone and place it in the Star Wars timeline, it doesn't get much more evocative than this. And then the music kicks in. Listen to this absolute fucking bop. Jesus wept, what a fucking tune. We're then whisked away from the starships in the open sky, zooming towards an impressive room where we see Cal working with his headphones on, shut off from the world. The opening moments convey that this isn't going to be a grand story like the Star Wars you know. This is going to be something more intimate, something about the damage that war does to the people on its periphery, orphans and veterans, used up and broken and discarded, scattered to the stars like so many pieces of space garbage. What an opening, right? There's an uncommon attention to detail happening here, and already everything you see is teeing up Cal's trauma, showing how cut off and isolated he is. This is where Grease and Seer come in. The two swoop in to save Cal from Seer's ex-apprentice, the fluid and deadly ninth sister of the Imperial Inquisition, and both have some of the absolute best character moments in the game. Grease specifically is just wonderful. He's doing his best to be a Han Solo type, a suave captain with a quick comeback and a quicker hand, but he's clearly in over his head, and the cool front he puts up starts to splinter early on. He's up to his armpits in gambling debt, a seemingly throwaway detail revealed in optional dialogue that comes back to haunt him big time. When Grease talks about his debt early on, he shrugs it off, relegating it to a background detail. But in a great twist, the cartel he owes catches up to him, sending bounty hunters to capture Cal as payment for his debts. Now of course Grease does rescue Cal, but the whole incident is very much a wake-up call for him. He's not a direct victim of the war like Cal, Merrin or Seer, but he's been careening around the same damaged universe as them, bouncing from card game to card game. He's got a good enough heart to help Seer, and he knows what the right thing to do is, but it isn't until the consequences of his freewheeling past catch up to him that he realises the gravity of the situation. Life's not a game, he tells Cal. Before you two, all I cared about was myself. Easy money. Now it's different. Even talking about this moment just now, I got shivers. Grease as a character is, for the first time in a long time, accepting that pinballing around the galaxy, racking up debts and enemies is not who he is. There's more that he cares about now, and for the first time he's realising that there might be more that he can contribute as well, more he can contribute to the universe than a stiff heater and an ever-increasing bar tab. He might really be able to make a difference as a part of this team, if only he can keep them from splitting apart. Seer, on the other hand, is Cal's mirror image. Where Cal feels he let down his master, Seer turned her apprentice Trilla over to the Empire while being tortured. When Trilla is brought before Seer dressed in the garb of an Inquisitor, she taps into the dark side, escaping the facility in a flurry of violence and death. Once she gets free, she cuts herself off completely from the Force, hobbling herself to avoid the temptation of tapping into that destructive power ever again. In helping Cal heal his connection with the Force though, she begins to forgive herself, opening herself back up to the universe. She will carry the guilt of betraying Trilla with her forever, but Seer tests herself against the most fearsome foe in the galaxy and finds that she is enough. Her failure does not define her, and the future is hers. Cere's big payoff is the final mission to the Inquisitor's stronghold, where she gets this supremely cool sequence of dispatching stormtroopers that mirrors a similar scene where Cal's old master cuts through clone troopers during Order 66, once again drawing a parallel between her and Jara Tapal. She finally comes face to face with Trilla here, and she gets to apologise to the apprentice she abandoned. Cal has built up a sense of survivor's guilt, blaming himself for his master's death, but Cere refuses to allow Cal to project that dynamic onto their relationship, and that allows them both to heal their connection to the Force, to trust one another, and to ultimately succeed. Cere's inner strength makes her one of my favourite Jedi in all of Star Wars, and Deborah Wilson's turn as the character is superb. Like I said, Jedi Fallen Order doesn't really have themes, it has theme. And of course the character who embodies the best example of this theme is of course Cal himself. The DSMV would describe Cal as, quote, honestly super fucked up. He struggles with PTSD, survivor's guilt, and an inability to trust. He's erected walls between himself and the galaxy in order to stay hidden and to survive. His pain is visualised in the game in the form of his skill tree, which is not something I've seen discussed anywhere else and is just so incredibly cool that I have to toss it in here. Leveling up and unlocking new skills for Cal is described in-game as healing his connection to the Force, healing his relationship with himself. Just to make this extremely clear, the way that Cal learns new Force powers is by confronting the memories of his past. When he learns the last Force power, the Jedi front flip, he says that he's finally back to where he was before the Purge. After all this time, after all these hours you've been playing, Cal has been working just to get back to where he was as a little kid before all the damage was done. You can hear the pride in his voice. I think the best section of the game stretches from this moment to the fight with Missana Tide, the second sister, to the escape from Ilum. It spans maybe 5 or 6 hours and it pretty much concludes Cal's character arc. He battles the second sister on Kashyyyk, barely fending off her powerful strikes before turning the tide and sending her tumbling down the Great Rusher Tree. We as players aren't surprised Cal was able to do this. Cere and Grease are not surprised that he was able to do this. The only person who ever doubts Cal Kestis is Cal Kestis. Having recovered an important MacGuffin from Kashyyyk, Cal returns to Dathomir, where he comes face to face with his worst fear in a temple saturated with the dark side. The ghost of his master, Jara Tapal, speaking his worst insecurities back to him. Tapal is the locus of so much of Cal's trauma, his feelings of failure, his insecurity, and his self-doubt. The apparition accuses him of cowardice, brands him a disappointment and a failure for letting him die. The Phantom crushes Cal's lightsaber, his master's lightsaber, in his hands, leaving him completely distraught and defenseless, having just had all his worst fears and deepest insecurities validated. The extent to which this shakes Cal is honestly kinda heartbreaking. His face is stricken. If only I could have been faster, he says, lost in the memory of his master's murder. He spent so long now rebuilding himself, taking real pride in his rediscovered abilities, but as any Jedi will tell you, power by itself is nothing. Cal's guilt and pain cannot be healed by learning how to do a flip or throw his lightsaber like a boomerang. He has to forgive himself, to release the past and turn his gaze forward. To this end, Cere passes her own lightsaber down to Cal, once again drawing a parallel between her and Jara Tapal, and sends Cal to build a lightsaber of his own. She sends him to learn one more lesson, that he needn't define himself by his pain, or by the people he's lost. He can carry those people with him like Merrin, bearing their traditions out into the universe, honouring their memory by forgiving himself and moving on. His new lightsaber crystal cracks in two in his hands, irrevocably damaged, but he forges a unique lightsaber from its remains and the remains of his master's hilts nonetheless. It's something new, something uniquely his that reflects the wound he's suffered, but promises a bright future. Cal's arc is pretty much done here, and he doesn't really develop an awful lot more in the last couple of levels, but getting to see him interact with friends and foes as a fully realised little guy is great. Seeing his decision to destroy the list of Force-sensitive children he's been hunting this whole time, to save those kids from the fate he suffered, save them from being hunted and pursued and hurt, it's incredibly gratifying. Jedi Fallen Order doesn't really have themes, it has theme. It's a story about lost and broken people finding each other among the stars and building a family from nothing. It's about how they grow and how they learn from one another. It's about these terrifying Wookiees. Oh my god, why do they look like that? There's more to Fallen Order though. In the most Star Wars-y tradition of all, it's a story that dares to hope. Fallen Order is remarkable because despite its singular focus on the pain of its characters, it remains profoundly hopeful throughout. Each character is damaged, they've all lost something, everything even, but Fallen Order's gaze is forever fixed forward. After the hurt is done, the mission is complete and the enemies are defeated, hope is what remains. Cal and the crew of the Mantis are by themselves at this moment, unable to meaningfully change the galaxy. They're small and alone and on the run. But they have one another, and they have hope. Hope that the children on that list can live a freer and safer life than Cal and Merrin did. Hope that Grease can contribute to something meaningful. Hope that Seer can help others escape from the Empire where she failed her own apprentice. AAA games are really hard to make. I know I said that I wouldn't be tying this video into anything more complex than how much this game specifically rules, but part of why it does rule is because AAA games are really hard to make. Art departments, writers, narrative designers, environment artists, level designers, programmers, and many more all need to work in unison, juggling dozens of moving parts to ship anything at all. I was able to roll and smoke an entire joint before the credits finished rolling for this game. So I think it goes without saying that it is a truly remarkable thing to coordinate people on this scale, and even more remarkable that the art that they made was so singular in focus. That Respawn were able to drill in on trauma as a theme makes the game sing. It's a small miracle. Every reveal and every climactic moment hits as a result. Finding out that Trilla was apprenticed to Seer felt impactful, because it adds depth to Seer's decision to cut herself off from the Force. It no longer seems self-sacrificing in a kind of martyrly way, but instead feels authentically rooted in guilt. Cal defeating Masana Tide wouldn't have felt so triumphant had Cal not reacted quite so shocked. The game's decision to end on a hopeful note wouldn't have felt so meaningful had the characters not spent the entire game overcoming very personal struggles. When I heard the Fallen Order was getting a sequel, that hope was the first thing I thought of. I wondered whether we'd see Cal join the rebellion. I wondered whether the writers at Respawn would try to figure out how a Jedi in that struggle went unnoticed. As it turns out, the Star Wars Jedi games decided to plant their flag much further from the Rebels cartoon, which grapples with such questions, and much closer to Andor, which asks, what is the cost of hope? Next time on the channel I'll be talking about Jedi Survivor and how it tackles the death that comes due for all of the hopeful. Thanks for watching. Thanks again for watching. It would be extremely cool and based of you to like and subscribe, share this video around. You can find my Twitter, my other social media in my bio somewhere. It is there. Find the link tree. Thanks, and I will see you next time.